I mean, I guess it's always people's heads. Let's see. Let's see. Ooh, okay. Just make sure we don't have any little lost lambs. There comes a time when you don't forget it. There comes a time you'll regret it. You'll feel blue. You'll feel bad. You'll miss the bestest pal you ever had. I want to thank you for coming back this week. I know anytime there's an interruption in the schedule, it is disruptive. Last week, my kid was managing some health challenges, which is always a thing for our family. I appreciate you are working with us to be flexible. If you are interested in class continuing in the weeks to come, please either reach out to me or drop it in the chat. Next week, I will be out of town. I'm actually traveling to traveling with my children. So next week, there will not be class in any case. But if we'd like to keep rolling, after that, we can set up another series of dates. You just let me know at your leisure. And okay, make sure I've got everything here on the screen. All right, it is 7:05, so I'm just going to start talking. And if we get any other folks popping in, they will be able to catch up or watch the link. Hi. Again, thanks everybody. I'm Madame Onça. I'm the artist and co-author of the World Spirit Tarot. And today for session 4, in our first session, we are going to do a speed read of the major arcana. That is to say, I'm going to, it's like speed dating. I'm going to introduce you to each of the cards in turn. I encourage you to make notes if you're inclined that way. Feel free to ask questions. And the second session we're going to do at 8 o'clock, we will do a bit about using the tarot for self-care, which was a subject that came up often during the darkest days of the pandemic. So I'm glad to share with you some things I learned. And as always, I'm happy to hear from everybody else. If you have any questions or concerns at this time, just let me know. And otherwise, we're going to get rolling on the majors. So in most tarot decks that are traditional in nature, there's a series of major cards that go 0 to, I want to say 20. They go 0 to 21, I'm sorry. And that order is almost always the same. There are a few cards that follow a slightly different system. The only reason this matters is that, for example, if you're working with the Thoth deck and the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, a couple cards are switched. It's like the Strength card and another card. The reasons for that have to do with someone trying to make a better fit out of astrological correspondences. So if you aren't in it to worry about that sort of thing, do not sweat it. Just roll with the cards the way they are numbered. The way we will move through them today is the more traditional way. I think that those changes were proposed for the cards, I want to say maybe in the 30s. So what, 90 years ago? So in some places they've caught on, in other places they're still really a matter of personal preference. So we're going to run through them in what I grew up considering the traditional order. No value judgments on that, but we're just not going to digress too much about it. Unless you're astrologically inclined, it doesn't matter. The numbers are just extra, which is a great, brings us to a great notion about the cards. It's always important to remember anytime you have concerns about, what a card really means or how a card should really be read, it is useful to remember that the tarot started out, depending on your belief system, it either started out as a parlor game and all this other sort of meaning adhered to it, accreted to it over time, and it became a divinatory art, sort of as almost as a reflection of the collective unconscious, of our collective desire to have a picture-based oracle that anyone could use, or it is the secret codified information from the that was committed to the tarot as they were sacking and burning the libraries of Alexandria, which is a popular conspiracy theory. I was not there when the libraries of Alexandria were burned. I cannot say if the biggest library in all of human history was somehow put into these little cards. Couldn't say. I tend to lean into documented history. So what I think I know is that it was playing cards that became something greater. I almost feel like that is a more egalitarian way to think about the cards, rather than, they were handed down as some sort of mystical magic oracle that has been diluted over time by people's engagement and its evolution, where art and meaning collide with culture, but rather that something humble, like a game, developed meaning. Personally, I think that's a more powerful metaphor, but you do you. The point is that today we're going to work through the major cards. The majors, of course, are considered the big secrets. Arcana, the major arcana means secret, and major in this case just means big. So again, if you have a deck with you, you may want to separate out all of your majors, and if your deck is numbered, you'll want to put them in sequence. Otherwise, you, like me, will be fishing through the cards in the next few minutes. Because what I did not do today was I just put all of my decks in order except for this one. So I'm using this as my opportunity to sort. If the minor cards, all of our ace through tens, are the cards that describe, they're kind of our guidebook for daily living decisions. These cards are like the big life lessons. They are the narrative arc that would be written about on the back of the video cassette, the trailer, as it were, of the story of your life. So they are big. And if you want to sound really woo-woo about it, then you could say that the major arcana are the cards that are here to describe the work that you came here to do. That's entirely, again, a matter of how you choose to view your life. But sometimes I find it's useful to think of it that way. Like, what work am I here to do? Today, I'm here to get my cards in order, literally. Okay, so let's start. 0 is typically the Fool. Again, I reiterate as we go along, if you have any questions, you are welcome to drop them in the chat. Hopefully I'm not missing that already. I don't see anything there. Yeah, okay, just let me know if you have any questions. There are, again, there's 22 major arcana, and we have 50 minutes, so I'm gonna try to go at pace. Some of these cards, they're emoji-like. They are so straightforward, they're pretty simple. In general, I like to say that all the cards have a spectrum of meaning, from more challenging to less challenging, or from gift to shadow. We say that about all the cards, but some of them really are pretty clearly mostly charming or mostly difficult. So some of these cards won't require a lot of subtlety, and some of them are infinitely deep. You'll get a feeling as you go along for what is what for you. The Fool card, this is the beginning of an uncharted phase. Here's my Fool card. Yours may vary. You're welcome to hold it up if you like, if you have a different deck than mine. Traditionally, it is usually a young man, classic jester. And in many of them, his trousers or his tights are falling down, and he's literally, either the dog is nipping at his heels, or in some of them, you can actually see his testicles in the back, and the dog is biting his testicles. So you can see that's some very medieval humor. There, most decks these days opt for more of the dog is nipping at your heels, and often perceived not so much as a form of divine comeuppance, but is really there more as a bit of a spiritual or animal companion. When the Fool card comes up, an uncharted phase in your life begins. The readings tend to support the idea that it's a great time to dare to do something new, for you to live fully in the present, for you to weigh, but ultimately embrace a certain amount of risk. It is an auspicious time to make a leap of faith, to flout convention, to pursue your dreams. It is not an excuse to be dumb or flippant per se. Don't make bad choices, but it is a good time to make brave choices. The Mythic Tarot, which is a deck that I would love to recommend for the book, which is very, I would say, Jungian in its approach. Juliet Sharman Burke, who's one of the authors from the Mythic Tarot, describes not to begin is to deny the gods. So when this card comes up, the universe is really saying, go for it. I double dog dare you to be as awesome as you can be. Hence the image that we see over and over of the Fool of sort of stepping off a cliff or stepping off a roof, stepping off into the unknown. It's always very exciting. It was important to me in making this card to embrace this notion of representation and let the Fool be a woman and let the Fool be a person of some size as well. And I wanted to lend a sense of lightness and levity to it with not only the company of the dog, but all of the birds to say, there's a quality of uplift. Even when you think gravity is most likely to grab you, this card invites you to embrace weightlessness, as it were, airiness. So also another thing I'd like to say about the Fool in general, I didn't really get the whole Fool jester archetype until I married a person who has that as their professional job and rooted in history. I didn't really get it. What I have learned through absorption to a certain extent is that the Fool was uniquely positioned in history at the point that they appear in the deck, because unlike every other person in medieval society, the Fool had no rank. In other words, if you were born to be a baker, you'd always be a baker. If you were born into a royal family, it was cutthroat all the way because, there's that whole divine right of kings, like God has picked you and selected you for your caste, what we would call the caste system being very specifically dictated. There was not a lot of lateral movement in that time. And from what I understand, the only thing that allowed for that ultimately and the sort of reformation of society was the series of plagues that essentially disrupted the static sort of feudal society. So what that means as far as the Fool goes, the Fool is the person who not only got to entertain royalty, but also got to challenge them. They literally exist outside the normal rules. A Fool could talk to a beggar in the street and also make a joke and bonk the king with a bladder on a stick. Like in a time and place where there's no such thing as the concept of everyone having inalienable rights, that's a really big deal. So the Fool isn't just a person who's sort of reckless and brave, but it is the notion that there's a bit of a magical sanction for someone who's willing to challenge the norms. So an example for me, when I was at Muncaster Castle, which is in England, that is the castle that my partner won the international jester competition at. And it is where Tom Fool, the famous Tom Fool of Stop All That Tomfoolery, that was the castle where he did that job. He was the Fool of Muncaster Castle. And it was a capricious and violent time in history. Some of his jokes got people killed because Tom Fool was able to do that with impunity. He could both relate to the lords, the owners of the castle. In fact, he ultimately ended up managing the castle. So he was a fool, but he was no fool. He was able to move flexibly through society. So I'm there hundreds of years later, and I'm like, oh man, I really wish I could get to those blackberries, but they're over there, and that you clearly shouldn't go over here in this English castle zone. And I was like, do you think anyone will mind if I go eat those? You shouldn't eat these blackberries. And my partner said, I'm the jester. What are they going to do? Doing things you're not supposed to do is kind of part of my job description. Go for it. And I lumbered off into this, dilapidated old Victorian, ironwork greenhouse that was falling apart, and ate a bunch of berries and thought, I'm not this kind of a rule breaker normally, but this is literally the job description of the jester, is to find the edges of norms and push against them so that people have a chance to discern whether those norms whether they're real, whether they're valid, or whether they are something that we should all reevaluate. So boom, the Fool card. I get it now in a whole new way. So when this card comes up, blam, there you are. Now I promise my sort of side mission on every one of these cards won't be quite that long-winded, but let us jump now to the Magician card, which I hope you have a copy of. Depending if you have the first or second edition of my card, of my deck, you'll have a different card here. but it's generally an image of a person wearing some sort of stately robe, surrounded by ceremonial garb. Maybe in this case, they're wearing a snazzy suit. In the next edition of my deck that's coming out, there'll be 2 different versions of the magician card, which is also a thing that has, you get to pick one that also has a place in history. When the magician card comes up, think about what we think we know about the god Mercury. This is innovation, intellect. This card comes up to suggest that you have all of the tools that you need in order to take action. We usually see this person working with representations of all of the suits. Like in this case, he's literally juggling, wands and swords and pentacles, and all the elements are represented to suggest versatility. So when the magician comes up, it says, you can do it. You already have tools that you need. You may just need to repurpose things. You may need to bend a sword into a plowshare. So this card bodes well for your undertakings. It talks about being able to mix both spiritual strength and worldly power. Again, explore your latent abilities and try to develop a deeper mastery of your known ones. My old tarot teacher, Kate Nordstrom, used to say, remember that truly clever people also accept good counsel. So when the magician card comes up, it's not just about saying, you can do anything, but it's also, you should be smart enough to ask other people for good advice. So the magician card bodes well. From the magician, we jump to the high priestess. In the old days, this was sometimes the pre-Protestant Reformation days. This card sometimes comes up as the papess. There is a tradition that there was the Pope at one point was a woman, and no one knew until she went into labor in the middle of a papal procession, and the crowd was so shocked they actually stoned her to death. And in modern era, the papal procession takes a weird detour and goes around the section of the city that she allegedly went into labor on. So Pope Joan, it's a whole thing. And of course, the church is totally in denial that that ever happened. But fascinatingly, though they deny that a woman ever had that job, because of course, how can you have papal infallibility if the Pope that they were led by their divine rituals to elect was a woman, and in fact a quote sinful woman, because they clearly had sex if they delivered a baby. Popes to this day, when you are nominated for popedom, you have to, there's a chair, it's like what we would call a potty chair when I was growing up in New England. It is a chair with the seat cut out. So the Pope-to-be sits in this chair, and all of the guys go underneath and look up and say, yes, those are testicles. This is definitely, we've elected a man. And you can look up pictures of the chair on the internet. It is fascinating. It has no job other than to be the opportunity for cardinals to go, down his balls. Okay, this is not a Pope Joan situation. So having made the leap from papess to the high priestess, which suits my witchy nature a bit better, the high priestess comes up. She is the veil between worlds. So when she comes up, while the magician is about using the tools of the world as well as your sort of mastery of yourself to accomplish things, she is really about everything that is most profoundly mystical: wisdom, insight, dreams, psychic abilities. When she comes up, I always think of it as a sort of a call to you to pay attention to your dreams, pay attention to your instincts. It has been said that the high priestess, hers is the face upon the doors of your inner temple. Often we see her seated between 2 pillars, as I humorously am here in this studio right now. Traditionally, one is depicted as being ebony, one is ivory, and there's like a veil of sort of pomegranates behind her, which is some classic goddess imagery about birth, death, cycles, all that good stuff. Basically, this card comes up and says, pay attention to your intuition, honor unseen forces and secret motives at work in your environment. She really encourages you to get out and spend some time in nature. Don't just get your sense of the mythic, whatever that is, from books, but actually try to feel it in your bones. Now we jump from her, this sort of female divine in its most rapturous and lunar capacity, you might say, to the Empress. So find your Empress card. And in my deck, if you're working with the World Spirit Tarot, In this printing, for no good reason, the second edition, these cards were not numbered. The majors weren't. In the reprint that's coming out, they will be, because it was just an oversight on behalf of the proofreaders. So we would come to our Empress card, and she would be card number 3. If the Priestess is everything that is sort of most mythic and most ethereal, you might say, this is pure Gaia. This is the Earth Mother. This is sex, death, decadence, pleasure, birth, aging. Like, she is really about life here in the material realm. She is the Earth Mother. So I like to see her depicted as really enjoying herself, not just looking very formal and stiff, but also like, I am in the meat puppet and it is great. Wouldn't you want to be in this voluptuous body eating all of this tiramisu? Like, she says, eat dessert first. So when the Empress comes up, she describes effusive self-care. She describes, that is, don't slight yourself, drink all the wine if you want to, but also drink all the water, because your body actually needs that. It may want the wine, but it needs the water. So she's here for you to make good decisions about taking care of your part of the planet, the part that is actually you, and also the planet as a whole. Be mindful of how you walk, how you consume, how you impact our flora, fauna, and other microscopic neighbors. So the Empress is really all about enjoying what is sort of best and sexiest about being here in the world. So again, she is also the Earth Mother. So having visited with the Earth Mother, we're now going to visit the Father. Having just had May the 4th day, may the 4th be with you. Here we have the I am your father card. This is the Emperor. This is number 4. And if you think about what we may have learned working with numbers in the minor cards, the 4, of course, is very stable. He is everything about civilization that is sort of, it is stable at its best. It is static at its worst. It is predictability and reliability at its best. It is dogmatism at its worst. So this card comes up when people have, when there's a call in your life to have more structure, when there is when you are in a place in your life where you might be dealing with father issues. I have had this card come up for clients who, interestingly, were into a kink lifestyle, and this represented their sort of power dynamic relationships that they were exploring. So anything that has to do with the dynamics of power, control, support, again, from best to worst, the infrastructure that brings order to chaos. He is the best and worst of civilization's offerings: roads, libraries, protection, oppression, dogma, information. When he comes up, it's saying, consider your relationship to ethics. Do you do things because you believe you should, or you do things because you are in fear of reprisal? He is also about the rights of the individual versus the rights of society. Privilege, individuality, authority, both civic and familial. As my co-author Jessica Godino wrote, dominion over one's self is necessary, dominion over others is not. So this is the card of daddy issues, for better or for worse. Now, having moved from there, we're going to jump to the Hierophant. There is a word that we don't see often anywhere other than the tarot cards. I've actually never heard anybody use it in any other context myself. Where is it? I think I might be missing one card in this deck. If you have the Hierophant card, please hold it up, because it doesn't look like mine is here. Thank you. Yes, we see there in the image, he is seated on sort of a large stone throne. It's sort of a Mesoamerican representation of temporal spiritual authority. Yes, thank you. He's got the classic as above, so below posture in his hands, which is to say, on a molecular level, we are organized in the same way that the universe is on a cosmic level. So the Hierophant, again, basically the Pope. This card comes up when it is time for you to expand your knowledge. If the Empress is about enjoying the material world, the incarnate life, if the Emperor is about embracing structure that helps, The Hierophant is here to help deepen knowledge, particularly stuff that passes down through generations. So he comes up when it's time to go back to grad school, when people are interested in joining the ministry. He is bringing together inner worlds and outer knowledge, like grounding what you experience in a real informed awareness of history. Collected wisdom of the ancestors might be one way to think of him. Again, he comes up for, whether that's grad school, divinity school, or just really sinking your knowledge in. I do find he tends to speak to the collective learning experience, the certification, the group study, as compared to the, going off on your own kind of study. It could speak to that, but in general, you see in the image, like he is there and there are people kneeling like prostrate in front of him, sort of supplicants saying, I'm going to endure what this institution might dish out because I believe it is worth it. So there's a sense of humbling oneself before some sort of authority that comes up with the Hierophant. It is, it's all about the collective wisdoms of your ancestors, for better or for worse. Then we come to the Lover's card, which I've got here. Many decks have different approaches to this card. In my case, it was important to me that this not be heteronormative, that there be room here for sort of a broad interpretation of gender and connection. Like, is this a sexually intimate connection? Is this an emotionally intimate connection? What's going on here? When the lovers come up, again, back in the day, this was sometimes known as the twins, so not specifically romantic or sexual. It is about partnership and union in the broadest sense. Although if you're asking a question, specifically like, hey, what's going on with this, lady that I like at work? If this card comes up, it may be speaking to romance. You have to contextualize it based on the company that it keeps. But it's about connection in general. So when this card comes up, trust the connection that you feel. It's a great time to sort of dare to reach out, strive to give of yourself without losing yourself. There's always a cautionary note here that we are most available to love others when we can also spare some love for ourselves. And this card definitely encourages you to lean into and embrace adventure. Let me know if you have any questions. Either, give me the hand or put it in the chat. The symbolism of this card, traditionally, there's usually roses and lilies. That is some sort of turn of the century Victorian occult speak for a mix of passion and purity. I prefer to think of it as passion and clarity, because I'm not here for your purity culture. And we do see Pan and Kuan Yin in the corner of the cards as sort of presiding deities that represent. Pan is there to bring passion, the physical passion that may speak to a relationship, and Kuan Yin is there to bring the compassion, the tenderness and empathy that can temper the purely physical aspect of our connections and build something that may endure. So there's the Lover's card. Then we come to the Chariot. I love this card. My teacher used to describe this card as all dressed up and not sure where to go. I also think of it as, it's like when this card comes up, here we see this person, he's all in his fancy finest, he's in his chariot, he's got these two incredible sort of mystical beasts that are loosely tethered, ? They don't seem to be under anyone's control, but they are there in a position to pull this thing. But right now, clearly everyone is at odds. This is a card chock full of potential, but not quite clear on its motivation. So I think of it as like you're fully dressed, you're dressed for the ball, you're in the pumpkin carriage, you're sitting in the driveway, but you got one foot on the brake and one foot on the gas, and you are trying to decide when to commit. Are we waiting? Are we going? So this card is about building up, and trying to use your powers to create the right conditions for success. So Chariot comes up to suggest there's a possibility for a lot of movement as soon as you can get some focus in the hand on the reins. So, love this card, but sometimes you'll experience it as that like horrible sound that is a person driving with both feet, both the gas and the brake, which is totally how my mother used to drive because she learned quite late in life. So she had 2 feet, 2 pedals. She could perfectly well slam them both on at the same time. Now let us find the strength card. Back in the day, some of these cards, they were an image of it. Started as a man. Over time, it seems to have evolved from being an image of Heracles or Hercules to a woman who appeared to be either prying a lion's mouth open, pulling its head off, or maybe just peeking into its mouth to be helpful. Depends on your interpretation. Over time, it has become less and less about the kind of strength that is dominating power over, and more about the kind of strength that we could call co-arising, like a tide that rises all boats. When the strength card comes up in a reading, it is usually about strength that comes from within rather than dominating others. There is a quality to this card that suggests there is power in recognizing small things, hence the image of the little mouse. If you think back to the Aesop fable you may be aware of the mighty lion with the thorn in its paws and the little mouse that comes along and saves the day, because the day does not always go to the biggest and scariest. So this card is all about endurance, perseverance, and moving towards a bit more of a slow and steady victory rather than the domineering version. Now we come to the Hermit card. Again, feel free to ask questions if you need to. We are moving our way. We're just about to get halfway through, so I'm talking fast, but we can run a little long if we need to, whatever it takes. We've already met the Hierophant, which is the card of engaging in the, I want to say, public or collective tradition of information sharing. The Hermit is a little bit more, can be more about your personal journey. It's not you going to get a yoga certification, it's you maintaining a yoga practice for yourself. It is you journaling for yourself. It is you taking time for yourself. So when the Hermit card comes up, typically we see a person on some sort of a mountain path holding a lantern, cloaked figure. Again, it was important to me to make this person gender ambiguous, because there's nothing that says the hermit has to be a dude. It's just traditionally depicted as sort of a Dumbledore, Gandalf type. Doesn't have to be. Not everybody in the world grows a beard, not even men. This card suggests turning away from ordinary things to seek the voice of the divine within. Sometimes it's working like one-on-one with a person or a tradition, or going on your own. In blazing your own path, you may find that you are forging a path for others. So you go from being the person sort of stumbling along with the lantern to the beacon that others are following, because you are navigating a path that makes space for others. So the Hermit says, you've got deep inner work to do, but others may benefit on it. Now we come to the Wheel of Fortune. This is another card that has come to mean more to me over time. I used to think of it as just the like the magic 8 ball. When the magic 8 ball, you'd shake it around and look what it said, and it says ask again later. I sort of thought of the Wheel of Fortune that way, like insufficient data is available, because the Wheel of Fortune, the whole premise is that, yeah, it might be up now, it's going down later, you might be in the bottom now, but eventually everybody's on top. Interestingly, this card is the only mechanism that is represented in the tarot, right? We see, the Hermit is an embodiment of a person. The High Priestess is an embodiment of a person. The Devil is an embodiment of a set of challenging qualities, with the entity as its avatar, right? The Wheel of Fortune is a thing. It is a mechanism that describes the way the universe rolls on, and then eventually, everything is ground to dust, and from dust we return. So it's sort of almost like the Western way to think about, I'm going to say reincarnation. Now, it's very messy to go, the golden rule, it's just like karma. Like, we're talking about different belief systems. It's not fair to just sort of glue them all together as if there aren't any nuances. But it is interesting to note that this describes that cyclical quality. And that is why we see There's a baby, there's the sort of mother maiden crone. We see the cycle being played out on the wheel. We see time moving. We see again, there's this representation of like almost like the earth mother and the patronus, and there's the rising and dying god of the corn there. Everything in this card speaks to whatever it's like now, it's going to be different later. And now, interestingly, again, having spent some time around jester things I didn't know about, the Wheel of Fortune is the card that is essentially the patron card and patron saint of gamblers and jugglers. The reason being that the Wheel of Fortune is Lady Luck. So Lady Luck, they say, you would rather she not notice you at all. You don't want to tempt fortune. But if you do, you sure hope that Lady Luck is smiling. So there's actually a fountain in Italy dedicated to Donna Fortuna, who's really big for Italians. And my partner, when he's in Italy, will go there and do a show for the fountain just to try to cultivate her good graces. So think about Donna Fortuna, maybe when you're nervous pulling out of the driveway, be like, Lady Luck, if you're going to notice me, make it good. And now that, yes.
Good question. Why are the women bound to the wheel? Why are they covering their eyes?
Because we don't know where we're going. Like in a general sense, we know you're born, you live, you die. But the details, since we live in mammalian time, we experience things as one event after another. So we don't know how it turns out till we're in it. But the baby, I think it's interesting because the baby has the most like, I don't even know what time is. Has the sort of least, they have the least information, but the least prejudice. And everybody else is kind of just waiting to ride it out. Thank you. That's an excellent question. Now with the Wheel of Fortune, again, so it is a mechanism, it is a tool, it is a representation of this sort of cosmic churn. But with the Justice card, we start to run into a couple cards that are sometimes known as the cards of virtue, because justice is represented as a person, like Lady Justice or the Justice, but it is also more a way of getting through the world, or a set of values perhaps. So when the Justice card comes up, you can, and here it is, usually there's some version once again of the person who is blindfolded for different reason. The symbolism of the blindfold comes up often in the cards. Sometimes it is turning to your inner sight. Sometimes it is trying to function without prejudice about the way that things appear. It means different things at different times. But we see with this card, expect speedy resolution of any outstanding legal issues. I've seen this come up for people who were dealing with a custody battle or waiting to get, their green card, their sort of immigration status settled, that kind of thing. Also, I find this card asks you to do homework around big decisions. There is a difference between what is legal and what is just. For example, slavery has been, oh shit, there was a big wreck. I just felt it. Like my house just shook because of a wreck in the neighborhood. Oof. My thoughts go to whoever that was.
Yeah, right? I heard it actually. Wow.
You know where I live? Like, that's amazing. I could hear that. I'm sorry, persons. Hope you're okay. And then the sound of someone driving away really fast. So I wonder if someone got hit and someone fled the scene. So soon we'll probably hear sirens as well. I would run out if I thought I could help. When this card comes up, sometimes it is asking you, what is legal may be different from what is right. Slavery, totally legal. Never was it right. Napoleon reinstated slavery, when it had already been made illegal in the Caribbean. Like, they didn't even make it. It wasn't just, oh, we knew better. Like it was never right. So this card asks you sometimes to ask some deep questions about what is truly just and be honest. Because, all things get outed in time. Now we come to the Hanged Man. And cat's desperate want to get in here. I don't seem to have that one in this deck either. So if you've got yours, if you want to hold that up for us. It's essentially a fella hanging by his ankle from a tree. You will see, thank you. You will see most images of the hanged man are clearly non-lethal. That is not a person being hung from their neck. They are being hung from their foot, which suggests that it is a choice. It is a choice to change perspective. I'm going to walk and let the cat in rather than some sort of hardship that is being inflicted from without. When we see the hanged man, come on in, cat. It is most often a representation of one of several situations. It can literally be a bit of a verbal pun, like you are all hung up. You cannot take action right now because the facts are tied up and confused. It can also be a conscious choice. Hey, Beans. I always think of this as like going back to school or doing a certification. It can be a choice to make your life more challenging in the short term for long-term goal. Hence the imagery. It is an image, once again, of the Nordic god who chose to undergo a sort of a vision quest and hung and fasted from the tree for many, many days in order to bring the language of runes to the humans. So he undertook a spiritual quest for the greater good of people. So this card can come up around that kind of thing. It can also come up at its worst for people who are habitually codependent. If you're a martyr because you're hoping somebody is going to be grateful, perhaps you haven't done your homework. So when this card comes up, ask yourself, like, was martyrdom called for? Feel free to come in. That wreck was incredible, huh?
Yeah, everything's fine.
Okay, good. We felt it in the class could hear it. It rocked the house. Getting the news from the outside. Okay, good. I'm glad. I was like, feel free. You can take this one. I'm good. So the hangman, dig deep down into your reserves of time, resources, and creativity to get to the other side of whatever adventure you are undertaking. And again, beware habitual martyrdom. Now we come to, speaking of, the death card. Where is it? Ooh.
I don't like when you say speaking of when you're doing tarot when I walk in.
Speaking of people with fancy hats, there it is. Of course, a nice thing to know about the tarot is the card that you need is always the 78th card in the deck. Wherever it is that you start, the card is on the other side. All versions of the death card are going to represent some sort of transition from one mortal state, from the mortal state to the immortal state. This image in particular is the first friend that I lost to tragedy. That is my friend Galen Gibson, who was killed in one of America's first high-profile campus shootings. There he is with his very distinctive 80s hair. That was a pivotal moment for me in understanding that mortality is a thing that happens even to young people. It's not an abstract, it is an absolute. This card rarely comes up to speak to actual physical death. Parentheses, if you're reading cards for people and it does, and you are fairly sure that that's what it is, you have an obligation to not pass on your concerns to somebody. I think this card might be about you being gonna die. That would be hugely irresponsible for every reason. The odds of you being wrong are incredible, mathematically incredible. The odds, even if you're right, how are you helping? So if this comes up, you can say, wow, with the presence of the death card here, we really see that you've got a lot going on in your life, and it's probably a really good time for you to, think about what's important and take steps. In other words, you can counsel someone be judicious with their use of life and time without creating difficulty and drama by foretelling someone's demise. The death card usually comes up to describe other kinds of transition. It's usually, the much needed end of a toxic relationship, an outmoded idea, a bad work situation, some kind of similar implosion. So the great thing about this card is that as much as it speaks to the difficult end of a situation, it always often speaks to the dawn that comes on the other side. Welcome, Anne. Thank you for joining us. We're just plowing our way through our major cards. As you can see, I've got my class assistant here. Very helpful guy. Now we go from the death card to the temperance card. I found that word a bit mysterious when I first started working with the cards, because you think of the temperance movement. And in a sense, the temperance sometimes is known as the card of art, or it is a card of alchemy. It's very much about finding the perfect livable mix. I think of this card as counseling. It's not a matter of sobriety so much, that depends on the person, but it does encourage moderation and the pursuit of equilibrium. It is about finding a livable balance when it comes to making, if it comes up around decisions or communicating with someone else where there's conflict, this card asks you how much you can walk back towards someone in the spirit of compromise before you yourself are compromised. It's a great card. Very much a card that speaks to doing some work towards healing. Now, that's a good thing. There was your temperance card, because now you're going from the reverse of temperance, which is the devil. Dun, dun, dun. This card is fraught for people who have got any kind of trauma around like traditional, religion of the book kind of stuff, Judeo-Christianity or Islam. People have a lot of fears of the devil as a specific entity, but most of the time, the tarot, when it's talking about the devil, is talking about addictive, obsessive, imbalanced behavior. And sometimes the devil can be a good thing. Sometimes the devil is a little bit of, kicking your heels up and, letting off a little steam. But if he comes up in a full complement of cards that are deep, dark, and dangerous, he's talking about denial and choices that the querent may be making that will ultimately destroy not only themselves and their lives, but those around them. So the devil can be a little judgy. Very often it is about addiction. Going from that cheerful lad, so we've gone through death, had a little break there, then it was the devil. Now we're on to the tower. If any of you have caught my Wednesday night show that I do on Twitch, it is Tarot Talk for the Tower Times. That's why we talk about the Tower Times. The Tower is the card of the mighty brought low. It is the card of catastrophic events and bad timing that bring you the unwanted blessing of a radical change of perspective. The good news is when the Tower card comes up, you now know something you didn't know before. It's not just random nastiness. It is becoming aware of the true shape of things. The way down from the tower is full of surprises, as my co-author Jessica says. So it's very hard for you as a reader to... I advise diplomacy when you are describing this card to someone in the context of reading, because you never want someone to feel doomed. Everything is not written. We have free will, but if somebody has the tower coming for them, they may need some moral support in perceiving that the tower brings gifts and not just catastrophe. Which is just a time for the star. Here's the star. This is one of those cards that's kind of simplistic. Having said that, it's just kind of like emoji speak. This card says, after all that, everything you've been through with the tower and the devil and the hanged man and all of this sort of exciting, tumultuous events, the cat's tongue is now sticking out. The star speaks to healing, calming, inspiration, the flow of optimism again. So there's something here about being reborn or reinvented, wiser for having gone through all of your life experience. It says the more you choose to give, the more you may also choose to receive. So the star. And then we come to the moon, and we're actually making pretty good time. We have just a handful of cards left, and I will invite conversation if you've got questions. The moon card has, I want to say, two parallel sets of meaning. For folks who have grown up in a sort of a witch positivity, we think of the moon as being broadly a piece of very positive imagery. She's sort of the patron satellite of all things intuitive. So the moon card can come up for dreams, daydreams, messages from your deep mind, your collective unconscious, intuition, introspection, all of these things that we can think of as the work of a friend. However, previous to this moment in history of witch positivity, the moon card has often been considered a bit menacing, because if you imagine yourself walking across a sort of lunar landscape in the moonlight, it's hard to have three-dimensional perception. Are you stepping in, are you stepping down a little bit, or are you stepping right off a cliff? It's hard to tell when the lighting is extreme and nuanced the way that moonlight can be. So the moon card can also speak to unseen forces at work and unseen obstacles. So know, again, as you look at it in context, the question is this about intuition and really leaning into my lunar self, or is this about being careful where you step? And are those in fact two different things? Now we come to our last three cards, and then we'll open it up for some questions if anybody has them. I know you're probably writing like mad trying to catch all this. The Sun card. This is, again, a card that is somewhat simplistic. It's a card of celebration, joy, freedom, recovery after that period of challenge. This is sometimes known as the ultimate card of blessing. Release old habits of guardedness, embrace optimism, and enjoy some new vitality, because you have survived so much and now you are free to enjoy the healthy pleasures available to you. If there's any shadow side to this card, it's just that, when everything is so bright and shiny, the shadows are deeper, right? So you may be so dazzled by all the wonderful things that this card brings up and speaks to. You may lose track of some things. You may step on a scorpion in the shade. I would still say it's worth the trade after everything you've been through with all those other cards. Then we come to the Judgment card. Traditional renderings of this card are often funereal and rather zomborific. It's usually dead people being summoned from the graves by the angel of resurrection. That imagery doesn't really work very well for me, hence leaning into Anubis is a different way to interpret that experience. But I will say, however you choose to depict your Judgment card, it is two things. It usually speaks to making big decisions. It often has to do with a reckoning about how you have lived or how you would like to live. And in that sense, there's a sense of resurrection. It is moving past who you have been, what you have done, to who you would like to be and what you want to do moving forward. Sometimes I like to say, imagine if somebody were to write your eulogy tomorrow, would you like it? Could they write you a good eulogy? If not, is there anything that you might choose to do differently in order to merit a sort of better summary of your life? The Judgment card and Justice card can slosh back and forth and be a little confusing to make a distinction between them. So if you really try to remember that the Judgment card so much is about transitioning from one phase of life to another, and the Justice card is really more about how you choose to live in the middle of it all, that might be a shorthand that's useful. And then we come in our final moments to our last one of the major arcana. This is often known as the world or the universe. Sometimes I believe it's even called the eon. And this card, when it comes up, it usually means that you have completed a cycle. There's a sense of, of mastery or finality. You're moving from one cycle and ready to jump into the next. Where if you choose to envision it as a sort of winding helix, you've gone from fool and priestess and magician and emperor and virtues and challenges, and you're spiraling around, and now you come to this different level. There's a sense of closure. The world, you learned all that stuff, you got this, and then you step off to be the fool yet again and start another sort of phase of the spiral as you wind up to becoming differently fully realized as a person. So this is closure, completed cycles of growth, wholeness, mastery, victory, fulfillment, and the resolution of old baggage in favor of new bright hopes. So that takes us in slightly less than an hour through all of the major arcana. I open it up for anyone who might have any questions at this time, and I will do my best. or we could just admire this cat who's,
Yes. So onto the death card is 13. I'm sure that's not a coincidence, but
correct.
what came first? 13 being unlucky or 13 being the death card?
That is a great question. To my knowledge, there's plenty about numerology that I don't know. Our popular association with the 13th as being unlucky, it has to do with a specific moment in time in the 1100s, which was when the Templars, which were the massively most powerful wing of the Catholic Church, the church turned on them and arrested them and had them all executed for black magic and sodomy. So that was a big day in the history of Catholicism. And they were a massive international organization. So to my understanding, a lot of the sort of superstition that we've picked up around Friday the 13th is actually very specific to that date. Because if you think about usually when we go, numerology, 1 + 3, that's 4. 4s are normally stable. So the notion of it being tumultuous, I suspect, came to us in the last 1,000 years. But the tarot popped up right around that same time. So I don't really know. All I can do is give you more information to contextualize it. But, we do think of 12 had mystical symbolism as being, there's the 12 apostles and whatnot. 12s are holy, and 13 is what you would get if anybody counted Mary Magdalene in the party of very important people, right? Makes it all asymmetrical and girly. But that's just my bias, informed by a lot of reading. There are some interesting parallels, as we saw, for example, with the Emperor. Again, there's that 4 speaking to stability. There are interesting parallels between the numbers in the minor cards and the numbers in the major cards. Of course, once you get past 10, how far do you want to get down the numerology, gematria, matching up numbers to make things make sense whole? That's part of how we ended up with some traditions switching several of the cards because they wanted the correspondences to fit their preconceived map of civilization. Do we have other questions, or do we want to take a quick pause before we step into the next class, which is going to be about tarot and self-care? All righty. Well, I'm going to turn off my camera and my sound for a minute and skip to the loo, and we will be back at 8:05. Thank you. Thank you. Hello, friends. We are coming back after a quick break. Welcome, Susan. Glad to have you here with us. Everybody get yourselves
Okay.
situated. For anyone just joining.
Okay. Well, fair enough then. Okay. I'm starting to start a Zoom meeting. I'll talk to you later, okay? Okay. Get back with you. Bye.
Anyone just joining us now, we heard the sounds of a giant car wreck, so I just got a little more information during the break.
Oh my God.
Yes, I felt it, in my house. And so what had happened was somebody hit somebody, and they actually drove somebody off the road into the embankment upon which my house sits, which is why I not only heard it but felt it. So, but my housemate came out and said, said people were slowly moving around with phones. No one was screaming. So like whatever they're doing over there. It was no situation that would be helped by my stopping what I'm doing and running to check. So she kind of was like, "Hey, are you guys okay?" But yeah, they mashed right into the house with some kind of giant vehicle. So, or rather into the embankment that the house sits on. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah. So I'm glad that everyone is okay. So, which is kind of timely because our second class today is on the subject of self-care. For those of you that have been in this particular topic before, I apologize. I'm open to feedback and how to keep this subject moving. I feel like we've all been trying to learn different ways to use the tarot in life in general, but certainly during the span of the last 14 months as our sense of normalcy as citizens on the earth has shifted. I think we're all here, so we're just going to keep rolling. This class, I also think of this class as calm the heck down. So. So there's a certain amount of preaching about self-care in here, and then there's a bit about tarot spreads. Really, is where we're going with a few illustrations. So sometimes, what do we need out of the tarot at any given time? We come to it because we're interested in having some tools for self-reflection. A way to have gain different insights into our own lives or into the lives of the people we choose to help or the people we care about. It can be a way to do the fascinating but painful archaeology of peeling back the layers of bullshit in our lives. I feel that I am a constant spelunker, pulling back layer after layer of asbestos flooring and finding out just how bad the asbestos is underneath. Perhaps you have a less melodramatic experience, but I find that the more I move through time, the more willing I personally am to look at what's really there, and not only my own stuff as a person, as an artist, as a partner, as a parent, but also as a child. I'm more and more aware of the sort of ancestral baggage that I've inherited from not only from my mother, but my mother's mother and my mother's mother's mother. The tarot is a tool that not only is fun for me at parties, and is a great way to help people, but it has really become an essential part of my personal practice in doing that kind of personal archaeology. So not everybody, again, chooses to, be quite so aggressive with the psychic pickaxe, but I'd like to give you some options so you can come at it from an affirmation-based approach, and also from a bit more of a merciless quest. Now, sometimes self-care just is pushing away things that are difficult and buying yourself a minute. Sometimes it's eating a pint of ice cream or drinking a bottle of wine or turning off your phone and doing something else, for an hour. What do we have here? Being at a crossroads. Yes. And oh yeah, it always helps to clarify. Working with self-care can look like lots of things. It always looks like drinking water. It always looks like trying to get enough sleep. Because whatever other things you're doing, there you go. I wish I could tell you this with water in my glass. Whatever else you're doing, those things are always useful. sometimes it's you just want to like light a candle that you bought at a fancy bougie, witchy farmer's market or something, because that is part of making you feel like you're taking some time to acknowledge what's going on for you. In other words, self-care looks like lots of things. However, in a world of bullshit, overpriced, monetized goop, witchcraft, and runaway consumerism, one of the things I like about the tarot is that once you have found or sourced or thrifted or made or bought your own deck, you've got a tool that you don't have to keep buying. It's not about continuously investing over and over, to make your self-care real, the way that a lot of the like, well, what you just need to do is engage in, 4 months of expensive rolfing. Like maybe we can't all do that. Maybe we don't have that time or don't have those resources. So the tarot, and if you don't use tarot, you can use a regular playing deck. Again, I want to remind you that millions of people over hundreds of years have just used conventional playing cards to do the same heavy lifting that tarot do. It's an extra layer of skill that you can choose to build, even more accessible, because who can't find a deck of playing cards for cheap? Sometimes you don't want to pay to make a date with yourself, and working with the tarot. You could be your own best cheap date and resource. I would like to say that Western culture, and certainly the way that I was brought up, really encourages a work-life imbalance. Even if you are a person who doesn't have to work, or if you're a person who is retired, or you're a person who's at a place in your life where working in the conventional sense isn't part of the structure of your life, we're encouraged to be out of balance. And even the way we talk to each other is, oh, how are you? Oh, I'm so busy, as if that was tantamount to virtue. And it's really important that we consider for ourselves restructuring that language, saying, maybe you are really busy. Maybe busyness is its own kind of cult. I realize that I personally was raised to be a perfect corporate tool. And I really have to restructure my approach to things, because that kind of work yourself to deathness is the older you get, the more that it leans into the work yourself to death part. So identifying as busy and stressed isn't intrinsically good. I'm going to take a note here to read what Susan put. Over time, if you don't sign up for it, then you're not pulling your load. Can you clarify what that means, Susan? Because I didn't catch it when you threw it down in the chat. When we are hard on ourselves, it can look like neglect, not being, oh yes, working too much. It can be not taking care of our bodies. It can be eating the wrong things. It can be, instead of eating that pint of ice cream once in a while, it can be eating that pint of ice cream every day when it's hard on us. It is challenging to put our own self-care forward, which I think is why we fall culturally into the trap of buying it, because then like that you spent the $50. Clearly you're engaging in self-care. Whereas, working with tarot cards every day or meditating or whatever, those things aren't as it's not as easy to check off your list. I meditated and accomplished inner peace today. It's a lot easier to say, I ordered a paddleboard. I stress shopped 8 cases of wine, or whatever your particular thing is. You may know, you may have heard the phrase that in order to be effective, you have to sharpen the saw. So if you don't take care of yourself and do a certain amount of maintenance, aside from all the other preachy things that I am saying, the fact is you become less effective as a partner, as a worker, as a member of a family, as a member of a community, as a parent, caregiver, whatever. Like, sometimes we just have to sharpen the saw. We have to take time to take care of ourselves. So what that looks like for you in terms of tarot, here's a few suggestions, and then we'll get into a few spreads. And maybe you are already aces at all of these things, and you can just bear with me while we get through it. Because I am a busy multitasker, even when I sit down to work with the cards, I'm like, I've got my phone, I got my alerts on just in case, and I got the door open so I can hear the next thing. And I maybe brushed some Cheerios off the table to make space to put the cards down. Life is busy and I am trying to fit it in where I can. However, if you can at least sometimes create a gentle environment to do some of your work with the cards in, and it might mean taking a little bit of extra time. It might mean taking a moment, literally, the extra 15 seconds to light a votive candle and go, a little peace of mind when you do it, or to put down a pretty tablecloth instead of just brushing the crumbs aside. Even a pretty scarf. I have any number of pretty belly dance scarves, and I'll just throw one down on the table sometimes to add that element of formality. Essentially, if you can appeal to your senses, meaning the aspects of your perception that aren't just your intellectual filter, if you can appeal to your eyes, if you can appeal to your ears, to your nose, it may help you to arrive more thoroughly in your person while you do the work. So setting a gentle environment can really help. And I would say the more extreme the circumstances, the more you may want to take a moment to do. So maybe physically clean an aspect of your space when you're sitting down to do the work. Just clear a cluttered desk. Empty a junk drawer before you sit down and do it. Sweep, anything that you can do. Open some windows to sort of energetically let some fresh influences blow through. So creating something that allows you to arrive fully where you are. Psychically clean your space if you are sort of magically operant and you're a person who thinks about the energies or the summoning the directions or warding your quarters, whatever your personal doing your praying to your saints, whatever the language is for you that allows you to make your space feel deliberate and a little bit precious. Your senses are the window to the power of transformation in ritual. That's literally why humans invented ritual. We wear certain clothes and burn certain incense and do things in certain days because it tells that what I think of as like the twilight part of your brain, the sort of symbolic dream language, what I think of as my witchy brain speaks in that idiom. So, if there's an incense you like, or some flowers that you like, go ahead and use that at least some of the time when you're doing your reading. For me, it's frankincense. A lot of incense I cannot abide. It's too sort of fake and flowery, but the smell of frankincense instantly helps me go, that's right. I'm a magical entity living in a world of mundane things. Very helpful. So appealing to your senses is really great. Also, essential oils, or another thing. If you just put a little on your sensitive spots, and you can oh so discreetly be like, I was going to read some cards. Smelled some lavender on my way to do the work. As far as sight goes, obviously you need enough light to read cards, unless you're so psychic that the scope of this class is not something you need. You need to be able to see, probably, to work with the cards. So you can use candlelight. You can use, if you're in a time and place where candlelight or flame is not an option, like an Airbnb or something where they've said explicitly no open flames. Fairy lights, like Christmas lights, are a great sort of alternative. They create the same, I feel that that symbolic language part of your brain registers them the same way that we register starlight or candlelight. It's a little bit gentler than the plethora of ring lights and technology that's around me right now to do this with you. So think about all your senses: smell, touch, taste, hearing, maybe being able to hear nature, being able to hear some mellow music that really speaks to you, supports it, or the sound of a purring cat in your lap, or maybe not the sound of a truck ramming into something when you're trying to get into the zone. Maybe you are caregiving and and it is a little hard to get in the zone when you can hear the incessant wailing of a hungry baby. if you could possibly outsource that for a few minutes so that somebody can take care of that for you, so you can be fully present, it's going to help you. And as Susan says, yes, make sacred space. And you can use your little secret hacks. Nobody needs to know. It doesn't have to be really ostentatious, but appeal to your senses. So, and think about textures. You know, part of the reason that I wear some of the silly witchy stuff that I do, like, I love this thing. Not only is it like, oh, look, I'm a wizard, but it's jersey. It's basically, you know, yoga pants that fit around your whole body, right? And so it's like, my ears are cold. Oh, no, wait, my shoulders are cold. No, wait, I can make myself comfortable. It is a wearable blanket that if I accessorize it right, looks like fashion. It helps me to feel relaxed and in a receptive mode. So fluffy blankets, cool floors, whatever it is that helps you get in the zone. Now, we've talked in the past, I know with some of y'all, about the notion of developing a daily practice or regular practice. So getting ready to read your cards, you've established whatever amount of, you know, sort of sacred space around yourself you feel that you can afford in the moment. Some folks like to do morning pages or do a morning tarot read, you know, like start their day with that. Your life might not be in that shape. Maybe you're just pulling a few cards for yourself, you know, in the car, on your lunch break, whatever you need to do. If you're a morning pages or an evening pages kind of person, get your book, your tarot journal, whatever. It's can be useful to write a little bit about what's going on for you before you even pick up cards. Because you may sit down and you may be that person who sits down at the table and goes, I don't even know what I want to know. I haven't given myself the consideration. I would have given anyone but me the consideration to consider what I needed out of this. I don't even know. So taking a little time to sort of journal your way around to the point and maybe ask yourself, you know, what do I need out of this morning's reading? Sometimes we just go, throw it at me, universe, what have you got? But self-care sometimes looks like being real honest about where you are based on the day that you anticipate, or the week that you've had, or the psychic archaeology you've been doing as you've been pickaxing your way through some of your life lessons. So when you're writing and when you're reading, some of the questions that you might choose to ask, often they're circumstantial. You know, what about this job? What about this coworker? What about this family member? You know, what about this investment? There's those kind of questions which are situational specific. However, when it comes to tarot for self-care, we're talking about a deeper, different, perhaps more psychological approach. Your questions might be things like, am I interested in learning uncomfortable truths about myself? Dear tarot cards, am I up for that? Do I want to know? Do I want to get into the weeds around do I want to get some deep tea on myself? Am I open to the cards showing me some avenues for change and betterment? What is it that I do in the world that is visibly good to others that I can't see? Sometimes self-care looks like just accepting the compliments that you're already being given and are unwilling or unable to accept because of how you might be wired. So, you know, what good do I already do in the world? What have I not yet begun to do? What kind of heavy lifting can I do in the world? The cards invite you to get in there and be really deep. Again, if you're already dealing with a lot of trauma, a lot of bullshit in your life, and self-care doesn't look like this kind of sort of debriding, then, you know, it can just be, hey, cards, I really need to hear some good stuff about how I leave my mark in the world in a way that's positive. There's lots of iterations of that, and you can do some journaling around that, or do some meditating around that sort of thing. Sometimes we need the cards to do us the favor of giving us some affirmation. Sometimes we need the cards to do us the favor of cutting through the bullshit and giving us some real truth. So journal your way around and ask yourself some of those questions, because we're now going to take a minute to talk about a few of those kind of spreads that will help you dig into it. Do you have questions or comments so far? I feel like this is a little woo-woo, but I know you guys can handle it. All right, everybody's good. So we talked a bit about spreadcraft in a previous session. And again, there's no one way to read cards. There's a zillion ways to read cards. So once you have taken a moment to say, in the spirit of self-care, what do I need? Do I need a come to Jesus fact-finding mission, or do I basically need the tarot cards to be that friend that I call to say, tell me I'm not the worst. Tell me some of the good things I've done in the world. Be honest about the questions you have. And then here's a few examples of how you might structure. For example, here's my handy dandy diagram. Is it backwards to you? I cannot tell. It's good? Okay, great. Fantastic. For me, it's 100% backwards, but the idea of trying to write cursive going in the other direction was a tad daunting. That was not what self-care looked like for me today. So this is a bit of a self-care spread. I wanted to bring up the question with the cards around what's going on for me that was leading me to my present state of mind. So I wanted to think about these as what's been going on previous to now. I would like some truth about what's been going on with my mind, like with the way that I think about things, what's been going on with my body as part of that whole self-care of the physical vessel, what's been going on with me on a spirit level. How did I get here? And then moving forward in the spirit of gentleness and self-care, likewise, like what do I need to do to take care of this racing hamster wheel that is my mind? What do I need to do to take care of this earthly vessel that is my incarnation? What do I need to do in order to take care of that part of me that I think of as my spirit? So I added a layer about how I got here. I added a layer about what's coming up for me next. And anytime I'm doing a reading that is very self-reflective, I like to add that wild card. Again, sometimes that card will just fall out. You'll be shuffling and some card will slide out or pop out. You can take that card aside and maybe that's your wild card. Otherwise, you lay your other 6 down, holding these notions in your mind, and lay that 7th card down and say, what is the question I did not yet even think to ask? So here's an example of that sort of mapping out self-care. Useful to think about where you're coming from relative to a situation, useful to think about where you're hoping to land. So tell me about the past, tell me about the future. I hear the quote from Dune, tell me about the waters of your homeworld. Tell me about the waters of your deep psyche and how you got here. Tell me about what my hopes for the future may be now that I've created a safe and loving environment for me to do some self-exploration. So as you can see, any of those things, I use mind, body, and spirit because that is a sort of a fast shorthand. But if you have a different language for how you choose to think of yourself, maybe it is more analogous to how we handle the classical elements with the tarot. Maybe it is like, tell me about what's going on in my world of wands, like what's been happening for me in my realm of passions and fire that has brought me to this moment. What has been going on for me in my world of cups, emotional connectivity, how has that brought me to this present moment? So you can apply the same sort of mind, body, spirit notion to the 4 classical elements or some other system. Because if you grew up doing Chinese medicine, for example, metal and wood are actually 2 of the elements instead of earth. It's all about building something that is reflective of how you choose to come at your, let's say it's personal cosmological mapping, like how you choose to envision the way that your deep self is structured. So, questions about that? Also, let's take a moment to talk about how you might do this in terms of timing. Often if I'm working with a client, like we will sit down and they'll outline either in their own mind or with me, they'll outline the question that they have. And we lay down a whole slew of cards and we interpret them. You can also choose to say, hey, self, we're just going to lay these cards down now. Like lay down that first handful, talk to me about how I got here, and be with that before you pull the next cards. There's no right or wrong way. It has everything to do with how you choose to tell yourself the story of your past, your present, and the choices you're going to make. So you may choose to pull that whole first row, talk your way through it, take some notes, journal about it, and go, oh, right. Okay, well, that informs and changes the way I'm about to pull this next set of cards about the future I'm moving into. It's not a thing I would do necessarily with a client because it's so much about personal reflection. And, somebody's sitting with you on the clock, in a certain sense, they want all the information they can get, but they also want as many cards on the table in that amount of time as they can get. You have the luxury of deciding, I got 2 minutes on my lunch break. We're doing one of each, or like I have set aside, an hour where I'm going to sit in the bathtub with a plank across here and I'm just going to write away. So here's our self-care. Now we're going to lean less into the personal, again, that deep digging and a little bit more into the affirmation angle. I cannot remember where I got this particular spread. I do not think that it was from Interrobang. It was from somebody else. This is the labyrinthine affirmation spread. This is the part where you call a friend and say, tell me I'm not the worst. Tell me that there's something good that I do in the world. Tell me that, the choices I have made the world a better place. Sometimes it is okay to ask for affirmation. That is part of the self-care. And sometimes the cards are still going to give you some hard answers. Might be like, hey, dear tarot cards, this is me asking, like, what have I done in the world that's really awesome? When you get the devil card, you have to sit with that and parse that out and understand, like, how you bringing the devil card through in your life, what that means. Like, how is that awesome? How did you make that awesome? I can see Anne laughing over there. Maybe it's because you're the life of the party. Like it's hell on your liver, but you've done a tremendous amount to elevate the tone in the room. I don't know. I mean, you have to do the interpretation and walk through it. That's where the cards get weird, is when you're like, so the positive answer that I got looks like a negative, but I phrased it. It's like doing algebra. You have to add up all the positives and the negatives to try to get to the math that makes sense. So here's how our labyrinthine affirmation goes. It's a circle. It's 6 cards in a circle. Essentially, once you take away like constellations, once you take away the fanciful diagrams behind, all tarot spreads are basically, is it lines? Is it rows, columns, or circles, really? Right? Everything is a variation of how you might choose to lay the cards around. Everything else is visualization. So in this case, your first card is affirmation. This is how I am amazing. And I would always put all 6 of these face down first and then flip them. So number 1, how am I amazing? Number 2 is how I am accomplished. And you can, of course, modify this language to reflect your own tone. Number 3, what I bring to others. And and again, for you, if that's like all 10 of swords, you have to sit and be like, so what I bring to others in an affirming way, is that because other people feel better about their own lives compared to what they're seeing over here? Like, what is that, right? Sometimes these things make us laugh because we cry. Number 4, that is, this is how I am skilled or talented. Like, find your language there to describe not just like what you're like, but what you manifest, what you've built. Number 5 is, how do I doubt myself? And because this is, even though we're asking the tricky question, like, what's not perfect? We want to bring this around and keep it affirmative in the end and say, but what can I do to nurture myself? So, and here's a diagram of that one as well. Boop. can be grateful to the belly dancers who provide me with this never-ending assortment of conveniently sized cardboard. It's a side effect of one of the belly dancers' works doing MRIs, and somehow something about the MRI process involves lots and lots of pieces of oversized cardboard. So once again, 1 is how I'm amazing. 2, how I'm accomplished. 3, what I bring to others. 4, skills or talents. 5, self-doubt. And 6 is nurturance. Yeah, there you go. I love the thumbs up. Fantastic. Maybe I can try to remember to pop this up on my World Spirit page too, for folks that just want to grab a screenshot of it. So it's important when you sit down to work on any of these, pace yourself, right? Unless you are on a month-long tarot jag where you've set yourself goals every day. I'm gonna spend an hour or whatever, which you can do. It might be worth, like, pace yourself. It might be worth saying, I can only do a little bit every day, or I can only do a little bit every week, but I want to do one of these, once a week on, Sunday morning. Or I want to do one once a month. Maybe it's the full moon. Maybe it's hey, it's a cat. Set yourself some realistic goals, because working with this kind of affirmation work and self-care, it's really going to be useful to see how they play out over time. It's really going to be useful to see if the practice of doing these lends you the self-awareness to feel empowered to make choices. Because if you're on your 5th week of going, that's still how I doubt myself, I got the same card 3 weeks in a row, maybe it's time to not doubt yourself. Maybe it's time to make some changes. Maybe the tarot can be that friend who you're not afraid to ask for some truth. So setting some goals around how much time you can put in. And I'm well aware that every time we ask ourselves for time, that is in some ways that can be one of the hardest things for us to commit to. But you're here, you made it to this, this conversation, 4 times in a row, and for some of you, many more. So I know that you are able to whittle out a little time. And the hope is that even if we are not together, that you can still make some time, on a Sunday morning or on your full moon or on your lunch break, whatever it is, to dip in and out. And again, it's useful to determine for yourself, depending where you are in your life. There are times in life when your journey as a reader, when affirmation is the language that you need, and there's times when truth telling is what you need. Not that the affirmations aren't fact-based, but sometimes I'm literally just saying, okay, tell me more about this inherited trauma shit that I got from my family. Like, that's not really so much about affirmation as it is, again, about like the archaeology. Sometimes you're saying, tell it to me gently, if that makes sense. Yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have to say about that. Then it's really a matter of just getting in there and doing it. Do we have questions? Do we have comments? I wish that we could sit together at one table, because we would be able to get much more into the weeds together. Do some sample readings. I want you to appreciate how hard it is to stay riveted on difficult subjects with this cat shedding and purring right under my nose. Look how ridiculous he is. Fearsome predators, the inheritors of the saber-toothed tiger legacy, and shedding ball of cat felt. Yes, right, the sweet baby. I know, Susan. Do we have questions about, well, let me put this differently. Do you feel empowered to work with this concept of building spreads that allow you to lean into the sort of truth telling or the morale building that you need to? Like, do you feel empowered to do that?
I would like to say I do feel empowered to do that. What happens to me, and maybe I had never thought about asking the chair about this. I tend to be distracted by the shiny in my life.
the shiny, the busy, the shiny, and then it's like, oh crap, it's been a month and I haven't even looked at my notes from last time.
Right.
And it's so awesome. And that's just like been a constant struggle for me for a very long time. I'm actually really proud of myself because since the last time we had one of these sessions,
Yeah.
I have looked at a tarot card almost every night before I've gone to bed.
Oh, that's
and then
great.
think about it in the morning. And it's like, that is incredible for me.
Yeah.
To have that kind of discipline. So right now, that's kind of my card of the day practice is like, I just pull the top card off my deck and I look at it and I stick it on the bottom. And the next night I pull the next one up.
Oh, that's great.
So at least I'm doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no, at least, like, that's awesome. That's, totally what we would hope for. Yeah, that's great. I don't know if everybody's familiar with the term NRE. It's one of the sort of dorkier but strangely serviceable terms from the ethical non-monogamy community, like polyamory, NRE, because I was sitting in some workshop one time and people could talk about it. I was like, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. And the whole room went, new relationship energy, which is essentially, it's that like, this dynamic is so new and sparkly, and eventually, like all relationships, it will settle down to being a certain amount of work and compromise. But right now, everything is just like, bubbles and champagne. When you talk about like, I'm, that feeling like I'm always excited about the shiny. It's like, I have that like new relationship energy with like, I got this new tarot deck and I'm super excited about it. Or I just learned this new way of approaching my cards, and it's so much more fun than just, showing up to do some of that deep journaling or whatever. So new relationship energy cracks me up. The pursuit of the shiny. Has anybody else had a chance to work with any of the sort of extended techniques, like either doing different kinds of readings or using the cards at night, like Anne was describing?
I need to mention something about pulling the cards from the deck.
Yes.
It seems like a lot of people just shuffle, and then pull them off the top.
Mm-hmm.
Where sometimes I like to spread them out in a spread and try to feel which ones speak to me.
Yes.
And I find that's a lot of work. Sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I'm exhausted from doing that.
Right.
And sometimes I feel like I get more from it, but then I'm like, oh God, that takes so much energy to do.
Right.
Just can I pull them on the top? And I'm usually not as happy with my readings if I do that.
Okay. That's fair. Do you find it helps if you kind of calibrate beforehand? If you're like, listen, cards, I've limited energy tonight, and I'm just pulling them off the top. I'm shuffling and pulling. Or do you, so that you sort of have communicated to the universe?
And say, this is my limit and that's it, and communicate me through that. Yeah.
Yeah, like rather than like getting in the car and like not telling anyone that you've decided that green lights are now stoplights, like make sure everybody's on one page kind of energetically before you change the rules. I have been,
and then setting that intention beforehand, maybe.
Yes,
maybe I need to do that, set that intention then, so that it's not such a complicated thing of, oh my God, which card do I need to pull? And I'm like, I'm putting so much work on myself.
Yeah, you're going to be less second guessy because like, would I have picked different cards if I did it using my usual, sort of feeling for it? It was really the notion of working with the reversals and having to make a decision beforehand about, are my reversals going to be energy blockages? Or are they going to be, measures of intensity? Are they going to be time delays? Like choosing to engage in some deliberate intellectual acrobatics beforehand has made me more responsible with the cards, as far as like, hey, cards. Sometimes as I'm spreading them out, I'm like, in my brain, I'm going, hey, cards, I'm just pulling 3. I know I usually pull 5, but right now I'm just pulling 3. Giving the universe a chance to try to fit more information in less cards because I don't have that much time, right? So I'm trying to get it clear in my head. And then you can add one and be like, hey, I feel like adding one, universe. But the more that I I try to be a little bit loose with it because I feel like the rulesier you get, you can kind of paint yourself into a corner where there's so much sort of ritual behavior that you're losing the intuitive. You don't want to do that. But taking some responsibility for deciding what the rules of the road are going to be can be a real help. Yeah, just and letting yourself be limber. But I totally understand what you mean about spreading them out. Because of course, you know, I generally feel along the deck myself, but if I've got a line that's 50 people long, there's not a lot of time for that level of energetic absorption. You know, and if it's a 4-hour thing, then I'll be like, hey cards, love ya, we're gonna make this kind of fast and juicy. So I'm just pulling a card out of the middle, 1 card spread, okay? Here's your card, here's a card. And then I don't have to wonder whether the universe got the memo that that was my methodology and I just gave this person sloppy cards because of not having personal clarity, if that makes sense.
So I'm new at this, and I've just been pulling 3 cards, but my pull technique is a little bit of a compromise. I fan them out in my hands.
Yeah.
And then just run the
yeah.
And just run my fingers through until a card says, pick me, pick me.
Sure.
And that seems, I keep getting the same cards, so something's happening there.
Yeah, right. No, that's perfectly legit. I usually I would spread them out on a big table, but since you know, it's a lot of cards, right? They take up more room than this screen is wide. But since doing so much online where my life is essentially a series of small TV tables, right? So I've got things here, and there. I also have started fanning them out a lot more in my hand because I feel like I can control the span of it and keep it, you know, so I'm not smeared across a bunch of tables. You know, everybody has to just find the thing that works. I just want to encourage you to remember that, you know, the same as if you get a different pair of shoes, you know, you still know how to walk. You just have to like adjust your pace, right? For the fact that you're now wearing trainers or, you know, high heels or flip-flops or whatever. I feel like the way that we choose to read, there's no right and there's no wrong, but it may be an adjustment to, you know, the circumstances, the surface. I did, they had me do New Year's Eve in Richmond for the big PLF thing 2 years ago in Decemberween. So it's a giant party and they put me in the cool, there's like a tarot reader booth. It's really cool, but contrary to their best intentions, they put it right next to a live DJ. So instead of it being like I've never yelled so much in my life, you know, which is like, welcome to the tarot reader. We're going to have a deep, intimate moment, or I'm going to be leaning into your face and yelling over a DJ for 5 hours. Like naturally that I had to do a calibration about like what building intimate space with somebody feels like, because it doesn't matter, you know, like it has to work. Whatever makes it so they can hear you. You know, and I'm a talky Gemini. I'm loquacious. I use a lot of words. There's not enough airspace, so I had to learn to speak a bit more bullet pointy, shall we say, so that they could receive it. And you know, once I got in the groove, like you're adaptive. You're going to go, you know, different. You can adapt your strategy to suit the environment that you're in or the energy level of your life at the moment. Like, do you have the, oh my God, look at him now. You know, where are you in the bright and shiny things versus the, you know, being very scholarly at any given moment. Yeah. Anybody else have any other comments to make at this time? Think you're able to do some self-care that you may be as relaxed as this guy? We've got his little toe beans in the air. He's ridiculous. Well, let me ask you then, and you don't need to answer, I'm surrounded by cat hair. You don't need to answer me here right now because it's a suboptimal format for group communication. But if you're interested in doing another round of sessions, again, I need to take next week because I am traveling with my family. But we can do another month if folks have an interest. I know for those of you who are newer, we didn't get to cover in 4 weeks, we were unable to cover the people cards, the face cards. We got through all of our minors and all of our majors. So if you'd like to do more, I'm certainly willing to do it from mid-May to mid-June or so forth. If the fates are with me in mid-June, I'll start traveling again, and so my internet will be spottier. So we have this month if you want. Just let me know, and just let me know if there's any specific topics that you would like to cover. With the minors, obviously, we know we've got to get through some more of those fundamentals. But for those of you that come specifically for us to explore these sort of the weirder topics, the making it weird, the queering of the tarot, the tarot for care, tarot for crisis. I love being able to design this material for y'all, but I just need to know what you need. Tarot reading with a lap full of cats and chickens, special topics, my specialty. All right, well, I'm seeing that there's some enthusiasm for doing more sessions, so I'll be in touch with y'all about that. Is there anything else we want to cover before I put down this hairball? We're good. Well, I thank you all so much for joining me during this time. I know that we're all trying to make time in our lives when there's so much going on. It's really a joy for me to share with you. It's a joy for me to have an opportunity to organize my thoughts in a new way. And frankly, the pandemic has been real hard on us as a community, artists and creators, and it's been wonderful to be able to see all of your faces and share this foolishness with you. So it has lent some shape to my days and nights. So I thank you all very much.
Thank you.
I'm really glad that my dog is not in the room.
Really?
She has a bloody eye right now because she stuck her nose in a hedge this morning and a cat beat the crap out of her.
Oh no, I'm so sorry. Yeah, would she be losing it?
Oh yeah.
He's not even technically supposed to be in this room, but like I can't make him, what am I going to stop him from being adorable? I can't even. Well, thank you all so much. I will be in touch. Let's assume that we'll be back together in 2 or 3 weeks, and I will let you know as soon as I've had a chance to look at my schedule.
Thank you, Onça.
Yes, blessed be y'all.
Thank you.